According to FEMA survey data, 53% of American households have less than 3 days of food at home at any given moment. 3 days. That is the entire margin between a manageable disruption and a genuine crisis for the majority of households in this country. But here is what that number misses entirely. The people who do have food stored, the ones with rice in 5-gallon buckets and beans on basement shelves, not quantity. Structure. Their supply looks complete on paper. It is not. There are 4 specific gaps almost every standard food plan has built into it from the start, and people only discover them when energy starts dropping, morale quietly collapses, and no one can figure out why. These 17 survival foods are what close those gaps. Most of these cost under $5. Nearly all of them are sitting on grocery store shelves right now. Almost none of them appear on any preparedness list you have ever read. And number 1 has been the foundation of human civilization for 10,000 years, but it is what you pair it with that almost no one gets right. You probably have 3 of these already. You are almost certainly missing the ones that actually matter. If you are new here, this channel covers what most preparedness content leaves out: the structural gaps, the real nutritional math, the things that separate a food supply that looks complete from one that actually functions. Subscribe if that is useful to you. Let us count down. Number 17. Breakfast cereal. The zero-effort day 1 food. I am starting here because this is the item most people want to skip past immediately. Breakfast cereal. Sitting in a cardboard box. Nothing about it signals survival readiness. And that reaction is exactly the problem. Most standard emergency food plans are built around worst-case scenarios. Multi-week grid-down situations, total supply collapse, long-term infrastructure failure. And those scenarios absolutely deserve preparation. But here is the statistical reality. The vast majority of real emergencies that actual households face last 48 to 72 hours. A bad storm. A short power outage. A supply disruption that resolves within 3 days. And for those situations which statistically represent most of what you will ever actually face, the single most valuable thing food can do is require absolutely nothing from you. No heat. No water. No preparation whatsoever. Open the container and eat. In the first hours of any genuine emergency, your cognitive load is already at maximum. You are gathering information, managing other people, trying to understand what is happening. The last thing that situation needs is a meal that demands effort. Most commercial breakfast cereals are also fortified with meaningful quantities of iron, B vitamins, and sometimes vitamin D, 25 to 45% of daily recommended intake per serving on most major brands. Not a complete nutritional solution, but a real one when you are eating from limited supplies. And for households with children, this is the food they will eat, without negotiation during a stressful situation. That is a genuinely practical advantage. 2 or 3 boxes of something your household already enjoys, resealed in airtight containers. Day 1 food. It does that job better than almost anything else on this list. Number 16. Hard candy. The glucose intervention nobody lists. This one is not on any preparedness list you have read, and it is not here as a morale item. It is here as a medical one. During a genuine emergency, physical exertion happens fast and often without warning, moving supplies, managing property, covering ground on foot. Blood sugar drops with sustained exertion, and in a situation where your last meal may have been hours ago and consisted primarily of complex carbohydrates, the drop can be sharp. The standard medical response to hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, is rapid oral glucose. Hard candy is the fastest oral glucose delivery mechanism available outside of a hospital setting. Glucose absorption from hard candy begins within 15 minutes. Most solid food takes 1 to 2 hours. This is the same reasoning behind why diabetic emergency kits include glucose tablets rather than crackers or bread. The principle applies to anyone under sustained physical exertion with inconsistent food access. A single bag of hard candy costs under $2, lasts a minimum of 2 years in sealed storage, and takes up essentially no space. It also provides a recognizable, comforting item for children during a frightening situation, but that is secondary. The primary value is rapid energy delivery, when the alternative is a functional decline you may not recognize until it is already affecting your decision-making. Store a bag. Keep it accessible. Not at the bottom of a storage bin, within easy reach. Number 15. Bouillon cubes. Electrolyte insurance in a foil wrapper. Most people hear bouillon and think flavor enhancement. A nice addition, not essential. I want to reframe that entirely. Picture your household on day 10 of genuinely living off your emergency food supply. Calories covered. Nobody is going hungry. Everything is right on paper. But something quiet is happening beneath the surface that most preparedness guides never address. Monotony. It builds meal by meal, day by day. The same flat rice. The same plain beans. The same meals without depth or aroma. And before anyone consciously recognizes it, it starts affecting behavior. People pick at their food. Patience shortens. The psychological energy required to stay calm and functional starts draining away quietly. This is not a comfort problem. It is a functional one. When people stop eating enough because the food has become psychologically demoralizing, physical and mental performance drops with it. One bouillon cube dropped into hot water changes that dynamic immediately. The smell alone shifts something in the room. A warm, savory aroma that signals to the nervous system that a real meal is coming. Plain rice becomes intentional. Beans become soup. That psychological shift is real and it is meaningful. But here is the dimension most people miss completely. A single standard bouillon cube contains 800 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. During high-stress situations, high-activity periods, or heat exposure, all of which are common in genuine emergencies, electrolyte balance is a genuine physiological concern, not just a comfort question. This is why bouillon has been included in military field rations for decades. Storage is nearly ideal. Fully dehydrated, individually wrapped, compact. Move them out of the cardboard box immediately. Cardboard absorbs moisture. A sealed mason jar with a silica gel packet handles everything else. Number 14. Instant mashed potatoes. The emergency kitchen multi-tool. A cardboard canister. A utilitarian label. Most people have used this exactly one way. Scoop, add water, stir, eat. That single-use framing is the mistake. In a genuine emergency, your cooking infrastructure degrades. Electric stoves go dark. Propane runs out faster than anyone planned. Any food requiring 30 to 45 minutes of simmering becomes a fuel liability rather than a solution. Instant mashed potatoes need hot water and 5 minutes. That alone earns them a place on this list. But here is where it becomes more interesting. Potato flakes are a natural thickening agent. Stir them into a thin soup and it becomes a stew. Work them into flatbread dough and they replace a portion of flour while adding moisture. Use them as a coating for pan-fried proteins and they crisp at lower temperatures than flour alone. That is 4 distinct applications from one ingredient that costs under $4. Nutritionally, potatoes provide potassium, vitamin C, vitamin B6, and dietary fiber, and the dehydration process retains a significant portion of these nutrients. The soft texture also matters specifically for children and elderly individuals, the two groups most likely to resist eating under stress. Commercially sealed instant mashed potatoes hold quality for 5 to 25 years depending on packaging. Here is what military food scientists understand that most civilian preparedness guides miss entirely. Food that requires more than 15 minutes of preparation under emergency conditions has a compliance problem. People skip it. They eat less. The gap between food that is technically available and food that is actually consumed is where most emergency food plans fail in practice. Everything from here down is built around closing that gap. Number 13. Cream of tartar. The 4-function ingredient nobody lists. This one is almost certainly not in your emergency supply right now. It is also almost certainly not on any preparedness list you have ever read. A small jar in the spice aisle, easily overlooked. But this is one of the highest function-to-size ratios on this entire list. Function 1. Leavening activation. Baking soda alone does not produce a meaningful rise without an acid to activate it. Cream of tartar is that acid. Without it, your powdered egg pancakes stay flat, your flatbreads stay dense, and your baking soda does almost nothing. 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar per half teaspoon of baking soda is the ratio. That is the difference between bread and a hockey puck when you are cooking from stored supplies. Function 2. Egg white stabilizer. When reconstituting powdered eggs for any application requiring whipped or stiff whites, omelets with better texture, frittata-style dishes, a small pinch of cream of tartar stabilizes the foam and holds it through cooking. Without it, reconstituted egg whites collapse almost immediately. Function 3. Potassium source. This is the one almost nobody knows. 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar contains approximately 495 milligrams of potassium. Function 4. Electrolyte balance. Sodium and potassium work together to regulate fluid balance and nerve function. Most emergency food plans aggressively oversupply sodium through salt and bouillon and provide near zero potassium. The recommended daily potassium intake is 2,600 to 3,400 milligrams. A typical emergency diet built on grains, legumes, and stored staples. That imbalance has real consequences during sustained physical exertion, muscle cramps, fatigue, disrupted cardiac rhythm at extremes. Cream of tartar closes that gap partially, affordably, and from a container that takes up essentially no space and never expires. A small jar costs under $3. Store 2. Number 12. Dried spices. Flavor as a functional necessity. Flavor management in an emergency is not a luxury. This is an important reframe because most people treat spices as a nice extra, something to add if space allows. Military nutrition research treats meal variety as an operational priority for a specific and well-documented reason. The human appetite is strongly driven by sensory response. When food smells appealing and carries variety, people eat enough. When it becomes monotonous and flat, appetite suppresses, even when the body's caloric requirement is high. That suppression has real consequences. Reduced caloric intake accelerates physical decline, impairs cognitive function, and degrades the psychological stability required to manage a prolonged difficult situation. Dried spices are the most compact and cost-effective tool available to solve that problem. A single 80-gram jar of garlic powder can season 60 to 80 individual meals. It weighs almost nothing. The same applies to black pepper, cumin, paprika, and turmeric. Zero meaningful storage footprint, but they completely redirect the sensory experience of any dish. One detail most people miss: dried spices do not spoil, but they fade. The aromatic compounds responsible for flavor degrade when exposed to air, heat, and light. Pre-ground spices in a clear jar on a sunlit counter lose meaningful potency within months. Whole spices, seeds ground just before use, hold their strength dramatically longer. Airtight glass jars in a cool, dark location. Under those conditions, most dried spices remain fully effective for 3 to 5 years or beyond. If you could only choose 3 based on pure versatility: garlic powder, black pepper, and cumin. Those 3 create meaningful variation across more meal combinations than almost any other trio you could select. If this has been useful so far, a like helps more people find it, only if you think it deserves one. Number 11. Canned sardines. The protein that outperforms every other can on the shelf. Every conversation about emergency protein follows the same script. Beans, lentils, maybe canned tuna. And all of those have value. But there is one animal protein source that consistently outperforms everything else in the canned food category, and most people walk past it without a second look. Canned sardines. The canning process fully cooks the fish. Open the lid. Food is ready. When cooking fuel is a rationed resource, that is not a minor convenience, it is a genuine operational advantage. A single standard 120 gram can delivers approximately 23 grams of complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids, and a meaningful quantity of omega-3 fatty acids for cardiovascular and neurological support. Those are strong credentials for any canned protein. But here is what almost nothing else in a standard emergency pantry can offer: calcium. Because sardines are consumed with their bones, fully softened during the canning process, completely undetectable in texture, a single can provides approximately 350 milligrams of dietary calcium. That is roughly 35% of the daily recommended intake from a single can. Almost no other item in a typical emergency food supply addresses that gap. The oil in oil-packed cans adds further value. Mixed into rice or stirred into a grain dish, it contributes caloric density and a flavor richness that plain carbohydrates lack on their own. Rotate them into regular meals now. By the time you depend on them, they should feel completely familiar. We are about to cross into the items most preparedness channels actively avoid. There is a reason for that. These next 6 require actually understanding the nutritional and chemical structure of what a real emergency diet looks like and what it's missing. Number 10. Nutritional yeast. The supplement that tastes like aged cheese. This one looks like absolutely nothing. Small flakes of pale yellow powder. Most people who have never encountered it have no idea what to make of it. But it quietly solves a problem that most emergency food plans never identify, because the problem doesn't show up in calorie counts. It shows up in how people feel about 3 weeks in. The first days of any emergency are about caloric survival. Carbohydrates, protein. Most people plan for that reasonably well. But when an emergency extends beyond a week, something else begins happening below the surface. A diet built primarily on grains and legumes will be severely deficient in B vitamins, specifically B12, B6, thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin. These drive energy metabolism, neurological function, and immune maintenance. When they deplete, fatigue increases, cognitive clarity drops, and mood deteriorates. Most people attribute those symptoms to stress or poor sleep, never knowing a nutritional gap was built into their food supply from day one. 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast provides approximately 130% of the daily B12 requirement and around 35% of daily zinc. That is meaningful supplementation. Now here is the part nobody expects. Nutritional yeast does not taste like a supplement. It tastes like mild aged cheese. Rich, savory, slightly salty. Sprinkled onto hot rice, stirred into soup, mixed into porridge, it makes the food noticeably better while simultaneously delivering a complete B vitamin complex, plant-based protein, and trace minerals including zinc and selenium. 2 completely separate jobs. 1 lightweight, inexpensive canister. A single container costs under $8 and closes a nutritional gap most emergency food plans leave entirely open. Number 9. Rosehip powder. The scurvy nobody talks about. Scurvy is not a historical disease. It is a modern emergency waiting to happen in almost every prepared household in this country. Here is the problem. Rice has near zero vitamin C. Wheat has near zero vitamin C. Beans have near zero vitamin C. Oats have near zero vitamin C. Lentils, minimal. Canned goods lose a significant portion of their vitamin C during the heating process. A standard emergency food supply built on grains, legumes, and shelf-stable staples is almost entirely devoid of vitamin C. Clinical symptoms of vitamin C deficiency begin within 4 to 6 weeks on a deficient diet. And here is the problem. The early symptoms of scurvy, fatigue, joint pain, slow wound healing, increased irritability, declining mood are almost universally attributed to stress and difficult living conditions. People blame the situation. Nobody considers that their food supply has a structural gap that is quietly contributing to their physical and psychological deterioration. Everything above this line in the countdown keeps you alive. What is below it keeps you functional under actual pressure, cognitively sharp, physically capable. That distinction matters more than most people realize, until they are already past the point where it shows up. Rosehip powder is the solution most people have never considered. Rose hips, the fruit of the rose plant, contain one of the highest natural concentrations of vitamin C of any common food source. 1 teaspoon of rosehip powder provides approximately 400% of the daily recommended vitamin C intake. Freeze-dried bell pepper powder and plain ascorbic acid powder are equally effective alternatives. All 3 are shelf-stable for 2 years or more when sealed. All 3 cost under $10. None of them appear on standard preparedness lists. A small container takes up less space than a single bouillon cube box. The return on that investment if an emergency stretches past 3 weeks is not small. Number 8. Popcorn kernels. The decade-proof dual-purpose carbohydrate. When most people think about popcorn, they think microwave bags and Friday nights. Nothing about that association suggests emergency food. That disconnect is precisely why popcorn kernels are one of the most genuinely undervalued items in any long-term food supply. Here is a storage fact most people have never heard. Properly dried and sealed corn, protected from moisture and temperature fluctuation, can maintain its viability for decades. Researchers have documented dried corn kernels retained in sealed archaeological contexts that retain structural integrity for remarkable lengths of time. Very few food products can make any comparable claim. But shelf life is only the beginning of the case. The obvious application, covered pot, any heat source, high-volume carbohydrate food ready in minutes, no electricity required. But dried corn kernels have a second, less obvious role. Ground in any basic manual grain mill or improvised crushing tool, they become coarse cornmeal. 1 cup of dried kernels yields approximately 4 cups of popped corn or 1.5 cups of coarse cornmeal. Two completely different meal types from a single compact, inexpensive ingredient. There is one more dimension worth naming directly. Disaster psychology research consistently finds that familiar comfort foods produce measurable positive effects on morale during prolonged stress. A bowl of popcorn during a difficult week is not a small thing. It is a moment of recognizable normality when almost nothing else feels normal. Seal it dry, store it away from moisture, and forget about it until you need it. Number 7. Powdered eggs. The one stored food that replicates a fresh ingredient. Fresh eggs are one of the most nutritionally complete foods available. Complete protein across all essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, choline for neurological function. In normal life, eggs appear in more meals than most people consciously register. In an emergency that disrupts refrigeration, they are gone within days. Without refrigeration, fresh eggs at room temperature remain safe for roughly 2 to 3 weeks under ideal conditions, significantly less in warm or fluctuating temperatures. In any power outage lasting more than a few days, that supply is effectively finished. Powdered eggs close that gap through a specific mechanism. The spray drying process removes moisture while preserving the nutritional profile. 2 tablespoons of powdered egg, reconstituted with water, produces the functional equivalent of 1 large fresh egg, including retention of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. In sealed, oxygen-removed containers, powdered eggs hold their quality for 5 to 10 years or longer. Reconstituted powder functions equivalently to beaten fresh eggs in virtually every cooking application, scrambled in a pan, stirred into soup as a protein boost, used as a binding agent in flatbreads and pancakes. For households with children, there is a specific additional reason this belongs in any supply. Under stress, children retreat to familiar foods. Scrambled eggs, egg-enriched pancakes, egg-based dishes they already know. The ability to produce those meals from stored powder provides both genuine nutrition and something equally important, the psychological weight of a normal meal when nothing else feels normal. This is one of the only stored foods that genuinely replicates a fresh ingredient with real fidelity. It belongs in any supply designed for actual cooking capability, not just caloric survival. Number 6. Dried split peas. 1 pot. No skill. Complete meal. After several items that require explanation to appreciate, this one is refreshingly direct. Dried split peas do something under heat that no other legume quite replicates. They dissolve. Given enough water, salt, and time, they break down entirely on their own into a thick, filling soup, no thickening agent. Water, salt, heat, time. That is the complete preparation requirement. Split peas deliver meaningful protein, substantial dietary fiber, complex carbohydrates, and a range of B vitamins and minerals. The combination of protein and fiber produces satiety that lasts significantly longer than grain-only meals, which matters when the gap between one meal and the next may be longer than usual. 1 cup of dried split peas yields approximately 2.5 cups of cooked soup, comfortably serving 2 to 3 people across a single meal or 1 person across multiple. 1 large pot serves multiple people across multiple servings. When cooking fuel is rationed, that concentration of output per fuel unit matters significantly. A brief soak of 30 to 60 minutes before cooking shortens active boiling time by around 20% when fuel conservation is a priority. Stored dry and sealed, split peas hold quality for 3 to 8 years without refrigeration. If you store nothing else from the legume category, store split peas. Almost no skill, almost no fuel, 1 pot. A complete meal. Number 5. Dried lentils. The fastest protein on any emergency shelf. Most people who have built any kind of emergency food supply believe they have the protein category handled. Beans on the shelf. Maybe some canned protein. The box feels checked. What they rarely realize is that most dried beans carry a preparation burden that only becomes obvious when conditions actually deteriorate. Kidney beans, black beans, chickpeas, they all require 8 to 12 hours of soaking before cooking becomes viable. Then another 1 to 2 hours of active boiling. In normal life, that is an inconvenience you plan around. In a situation where cooking fuel is rationed and finite, that burden repeats with every single protein meal across the entire duration of the emergency. Day 3. Day 7. Day 14. The fuel cost compounds. Lentils sidestep that entirely. No soaking required. Rinse directly into boiling water. Full edibility in 20 to 30 minutes. The fuel savings over 2 weeks of daily protein meals is not trivial. It is a planning variable that most people never calculate because they assume all legumes are roughly equivalent. They are not. One cooked cup of lentils provides approximately 18 grams of protein, 90% of the daily recommended folate intake, and 37% of daily iron, according to USDA Food Data Central data. And when lentils are paired with any grain, rice, wheat, corn, the amino acid profiles complement each other. That combination has emerged independently across dozens of cultures on every inhabited continent throughout thousands of years of human history. That repetition across unconnected civilizations is evidence of something that genuinely works at a fundamental biological level. Cost per gram of protein. Preparation time. Fuel efficiency. On every practical measure, dried lentils are nearly unbeatable. They are a foundation, not an afterthought. Number 4. Vinegar. The only ingredient on this list that literally does not expire. Vinegar sits in the back of most kitchen cabinets, almost completely ignored. It feels like a flavoring agent, a condiment, a niche ingredient for specific recipes. And that framing is precisely why it belongs on this list, because what vinegar actually is chemically places it in a category almost nothing else in any pantry can occupy. It does not expire. The acetic acid concentration in vinegar creates a chemical environment that is inherently hostile to bacteria and fungi, the organisms responsible for virtually all food spoilage. A properly sealed bottle of white distilled vinegar, purchased today, will be chemically identical and fully functional in 30 years. No other food on this list makes that statement without qualification. Salt comes close, but even salt can absorb moisture and clump. Vinegar is stable, but chemical permanence is not even the most compelling argument for it. Think about the complete flavor profile of a standard emergency food supply. Grains, legumes, starches. Salt adds depth. Spices add aromatics. Fat adds richness. But there is one flavor dimension that none of those provide: brightness. The sharp, clean acidity that makes simple food feel complete rather than flat. A small amount of vinegar added to cooked vegetables, stirred into the base of a soup, or used as the foundation of a simple sauce changes the entire sensory experience of a meal in a way nothing else in a pantry can replicate. Then there is the preservation application most people never think about until they need it. When fresh vegetables become available during an extended emergency, from a garden, from foraging, a 1-gallon jug of white distilled vinegar costs approximately $3 to $4 and provides enough acidity for 40 to 50 standard pickling jars. Without vinegar, that window of fresh produce closes within days. With it, it extends for months. Multiple bottles. White distilled for maximum versatility. Inexpensive. No special storage conditions required. And unlike virtually everything else in your pantry, it never needs rotating, replacing, or monitoring. Number 2 on this list rewrote the economic history of the ancient world. Today it costs less than $1 per pound. That framing is coming. Number 3. Ghee. The chemistry of shelf-stable fat. If there is a single macronutrient that most emergency food plans are deficient in, it is fat. Most standard preparedness guides build almost entirely around carbohydrates: rice, beans, oats, pasta. And while carbohydrates are essential, that approach quietly ignores a macronutrient the body urgently needs during sustained stress. Fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient available. 1 gram delivers 9 calories, compared to 4 calories from either carbohydrates or protein. A small amount provides a disproportionately large quantity of energy when rations are limited. Beyond raw calories, fat supports brain function, hormone regulation, body temperature management. A diet chronically deficient in fat produces fatigue, cognitive decline, and disrupted hormonal function. Ghee solves the stored fat problem through basic chemistry. Regular butter contains fat, water, and milk proteins. Clarifying removes most of the milk solids. Ghee is cooked further still until virtually all remaining moisture and milk proteins are gone, leaving near pure butter fat. The two primary mechanisms that cause dairy products to spoil are moisture and lactose. Ghee contains essentially none of either. The biological processes that make regular butter go rancid within weeks simply cannot operate without those inputs. That is not a claim, it is the underlying biochemistry. Properly stored in sealed glass jars away from heat and direct light, ghee holds its quality at room temperature for 12 to 24 months. With any degree of cooling that extends to 2 years or beyond. In an emergency where refrigeration is unavailable, that stability is not a convenience. It is the entire point. A single spoonful stirred into plain cooked rice increases its caloric value substantially, while adding a slightly nutty, rich, sweet dairy note that neutral cooking oils cannot replicate. Ghee also has a smoke point of approximately 232 to 250 degrees Celsius, well above regular butter, making it suitable for high-heat improvised cooking where temperature control is imprecise. Before refrigeration changed everything, before preservatives, before modern food technology existed at all, two of them are on this list. The third is coming next. Between them, these three items cover flavor, electrolytes, caloric density, and indefinite shelf life. The rest of any food supply is built on top of that foundation. Number 2. Salt. The ingredient that built civilizations and never expires. Before refrigeration. Before preservatives. Before canning technology existed anywhere in the world. There was salt. For most of recorded human history, the ability to store food across seasons, to sustain armies through long campaigns, to feed cities through drought and winter, all of it depended almost entirely on access to salt. Roman soldiers received partial compensation in salt, a historical practice so foundational that the word salary. Medieval trade routes organized themselves specifically around salt production centers. Entire economies rose and collapsed on its supply. Wars were fought for it. Populations without access to it faced starvation, regardless of how much food was growing around them. Today, it sits in a shaker on the dining table. So abundant that nobody thinks about it. But its importance has not changed, only its scarcity has. In an emergency food context, salt provides three distinct categories of value, and most people consciously consider only one. The first is flavor. Salt is the single most fundamental taste enhancer in cooking. Without it, every stored grain, every legume, every starch tastes flat and psychologically unrewarding. That is not a preference, it is the physiology of palatability. Salt makes food worth eating, which means salt makes people eat enough. The second is preservation. Salt inhibits bacterial and fungal growth through osmosis, drawing water out of microbial cells and creating an environment where spoilage organisms cannot survive. Salt curing proteins, fermenting vegetables in brine. These are ancient techniques with direct practical applications when refrigeration becomes unavailable. The third, and the one most people never consciously consider, is physiological necessity. Sodium is an essential electrolyte. It regulates fluid balance across cell membranes, supports nerve signal transmission, and is critical for muscle function, including cardiac muscle. During physical exertion, heat exposure, or sustained stress, all of which are common features of genuine emergencies, sodium depletion becomes a real medical concern. Adequate intake is not optional. It is a biological requirement. And the storage characteristic that nothing else on this list can match. Salt does not expire. Does not degrade. Does not lose potency. A sealed container purchased today will be chemically identical in 50 years. Exactly equal. Not approximately. Store significantly more than you think you need. Number 1. Whole wheat. The foundation that everything else is built on. Every other item on this list solves a specific problem, addresses a specific gap, closes a specific weakness in a standard emergency food plan. This one is what all of them are built around. For approximately 10,000 years, wheat has been the single most relied upon food source in human history. Not one of the most important, the most relied upon. Nomadic populations became settled communities because wheat could be stored. Cities became possible because wheat could be stockpiled and distributed across populations. Armies sustained campaigns for months because wheat could be carried efficiently. Populations survived winters and multi-year droughts because wheat could be harvested and held. That is not sentiment or historical romanticization. It is a 10,000-year record of demonstrated, tested reliability across every kind of crisis human populations have faced. Stored in sealed containers with oxygen absorbers in cool, dry conditions, whole wheat berries hold their quality and germination capacity for 25 years or more. In basic sealed buckets without oxygen absorbers, a decade or longer is well supported. among the longest verified storage lives of any food product known. The culinary versatility is unmatched by any single ingredient on this list. Whole wheat can be cooked whole as a heartier, chewier alternative to rice, ground into flour with a hand mill, or improvised crushing tools in an extreme scenario, and used to make bread, flatbreads, sprouted over 3 to 4 days, which dramatically increases vitamin C content, directly addressing the deficiency we covered at number 9, while also increasing digestibility and enzymatic activity in ways that raw grain cannot provide. One ingredient across dozens of distinct meal types across virtually every food culture in the world. Nutritionally, whole wheat delivers complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, meaningful dietary fiber, moderate plant protein, and a range of B vitamins and minerals, including iron, magnesium, and zinc. 45 pounds of whole wheat berries, enough to form the caloric backbone of one person's emergency supply for an extended period. That is roughly 30,000 calories for under $50. No other item on this list approaches that caloric return on cost. And here is what ties the entire list together into a coherent system. Every item above this one functions best when it has something to work with. Nutritional yeast needs something to sprinkle on. Ghee needs something to enrich. Bouillon needs something to flavor. Spices need something to season. Vinegar needs something to brighten. Cream of tartar needs something to leaven. Whole wheat is that something. It is the foundation, the base layer from which everything else on this list operates. Without it, most of them have nothing to work with. Step back and look at what all 17 of these have in common. None are expensive. Most cost under $5. None require specialized knowledge, specialty equipment, or unusual sourcing. Nearly all are available at any grocery store right now, today, in the next 20 minutes if you chose to go. What they share is something more precise than just affordability, durability, versatility, and the ability to produce real sustainable meals from limited ingredients under difficult conditions. The gap between a basic emergency pantry and a functional one is not about quantity. It is about understanding which specific structural gaps actually exist. Fat alongside carbohydrates, most plans have the carbohydrates and zero usable fat. Flavor tools alongside base calories, most plans have the calories and nothing that makes them worth eating past day 3. Fast preparation options alongside slow-cooked staples, most plans are entirely dependent on extended cooking time that fuel supplies cannot support. Vitamin C alongside calorie-dense grains, almost no standard plan addresses this at all. And scurvy is a real 4 to 6 week risk that almost nobody in the preparedness community talks about directly. And preservation tools alongside perishable ingredients, because fresh food will appear during an extended emergency, and without vinegar and salt, that window closes before you can use it. Every item on this list closes one or more of those gaps. Every one costs very little, takes up very little space, and requires very little time to acquire. Preparedness is not about fear. It is about making small, specific, low-cost decisions in a moment of calm, decisions that carry disproportionate value in the moment when calm is no longer available. The only real question is which of these are not in your kitchen right now. Drop a 1 in the comments if any of these items were genuinely new to you. I read every one. And if you found something on this list that surprised you, I want to know which one. One more thing before you go. Next, I am covering the 7 storage mistakes that make even a perfect food supply fail within the first year, and one of them is something that almost everyone who owns sealed storage buckets is already making right now without knowing it. That video is coming. If you are not subscribed, you will miss it.